Hello, everyone, and welcome to our AIX virtual session, where in the next hour we will talk about encouraging the startup scene in aviation, how they can help achieve sustainability goals. My name is Lukas Kessner. I am president of the Crystal Cabin Award Association and co-founder of the Sustainable Aero Lab, which is a global mentoring and acceleration program for startups in sustainable aviation. I'm happy to have both networks merged a little today with guests coming from both sides, and I would like them to introduce themselves real quick to us, starting with Achim, then Nico, and then Omar. Please, gentlemen, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, my name is Achim. I'm one of the co-founders of Jetlight, a startup here in Germany, based in Hamburg, and we provide with Jetlight lighting software to airlines that shift the inner clock of the passengers to new time zones. So we mainly reduce jet lag in aviation, but also have other products for lighting that counts on your inner clock and supports you in your daily life.
Okay, my name is Nico Buchholz. I'm a founding partner of Flight Level 500, a consulting company for mobility. But prior, I ran the Lufthansa Group fleet for 15 years. I've been with Airbus and Bombardier in the OEM function, and I've been with Rolls-Royce in the engine OEM function. So looking at the whole value chain of aviation.
Hi guys, I'm Omar Bar Yochai. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Aviation Aircraft. We make the Alice, an all-electric 9-seater commuter aircraft, 9+2, so it's meant for the commuter market. And the company was founded as a startup in Israel back in 2015. Today we're based both in Israel and up in Arlington, Washington in the United States.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. So why are we talking about sustainability today? Aviation must already slash 7% of its CO2 emissions until 2030. This might not seem like a lot, but still, we're not on track. Since the turn of the millennium, aviation industry emissions grew by circa 2% every year. And despite all the measures taken, recent research by the German Aerospace Center, the DLR, shows that aviation is still not enough to do or to even fulfill the 1.5 degrees Celsius target established in the Paris Agreement. And aviation is a complex industry, as we all know, and we're facing a complex challenge. So the question arises, how could new players contribute to the transformation of this industry? And looking at the established supply chains, as well as capital and time invested, how can we ensure that startups can even play a significant role in reshaping aerospace? So let's move this to the panel. I would like to start with Nico, since your background is both with the OEMs, the engine OEMs, and the airlines, as you just said yourself. You served 15 years alone as the head of fleet strategy for the Lufthansa Group. How difficult is it for new players to make their pitch to potential customers, and what are the biggest hurdles, and how can one work with this?
Well, good question. Next question, I could say. The issue is, if we look at it in a very small nutshell, if you're a startup or if you're coming with something new, the challenge is it's a B2B approach. Its deals require a lot of resources, a lot of convincing. It's not like a B2C where scalability is just one click away. And let me give you some examples on that. If there's a real new product which would disrupt somewhere in the value chain, be that operational, be that cabin, be that anything, it needs to pass the hurdle of the OEM certification, it needs to pass the hurdle of the airline, it needs to pass a lot of operational and environmental hurdles within, and I'm not talking environment in terms of green, but I'm talking environment within the businesses, and getting to convince certain people that it's the right thing to do, to lean out of the window and to accept that and the whole value chain. That I think is the biggest challenge today. And I'm sure we'll discuss a little bit more. I'd just like to throw these things in.
Okay, thank you. Speaking about the hurdles, Omar, Aviation won a Crystal Cabin Award for their cabin concept of the electric regional aircraft Alice. And recently you received some global recognition as you announced DHL Express as strategic launch partner for the cargo version. How difficult has it, though, been so far to get here as a new player in the aviation industry with a new product and even a new technology because you're flying electric?
How difficult is a great question. Obviously, no big deal. Happens easily. Nothing to it. I'm of course joking. The aviation industry is not a very friendly place for startups, and I think that's something that is maybe not appreciated enough in the very beginning of many companies. The hurdles going forward for a new company, any new company, are significant because the aviation industry justly requires a lot of standardization, a lot of regulation, and there are very significant entry hurdles. That said, the aviation industry is looking, and I'm saying this from the perspective of an OEM in the making, but I also think this is very true for the operators, for the clients, if you will. DHL is a great example. DHL was looking for the right way to reduce its CO2 and general emissions footprint of its fleet for a long time. There are no players out there that deliver what DHL would need. And sometimes the aviation industry, being so heavily regulated, being so dedicated to its old solutions, is a bit slow to move. It's a very traditional industry. So there is definitely room for startups that are humble enough and can take the long journey. There's definitely room, in my view, to kind of kick the industry in the butt and move it in the right direction. And I think one of the examples is our DHL deal. This is not some future maybe that will happen one day. This is an actual purchase agreement for the 2 or the 12 airplanes that DHL has committed to buy. And the reason this could happen is because big players out there are looking for solutions to, first and foremost, reduce their CO2 footprint. Secondly, have a product that actually works for them. And if you, as a startup, and it doesn't matter in which category, manage to nail these things, build a product that can be used in the existing business market, invent a new business case and find out a new way to operate your product, but it's clearly a viable product and you can go through those or pass those hurdles and kind of comply with the regulation, build things as they should be built in the aviation industry, the clients are out there. So I think that's really the promise that this huge industry holds for startups. But yes, it's not trivial to get there.
Yeah, I imagine. And Achim, you also have a product which is not an entire plane. It's a passenger experience product, which is human-centric lighting. So that also means you deal with the OEMs, you deal with the suppliers and the airlines all at once. How do you manage this?
Yeah, to be honest, it's networking is very necessary. So you need a lot of contacts within the aviation industry, and you have or you need a lot of experience how to handle different ways to work with an OEM, to deal with an OEM or tier 1 or tier 2. And from this side, me and my co-founder Felix, we have a lot of experience in the industry and working together with OEMs or at an OEM company. But it is, as Omar already mentioned, a very it's not a very friendly industry regarding collaborations with startups. So it's a long way to find a way how to work together with a company and to convince someone to use the products, and also to convince them that we have the experience or that we know what we do. And it's not only the certification process that is very long and for a startup very hard to go through, but it's also to convince the people within the OEMs or tier one, for example, to convince them that it's worth to work with you. It's not just an idea, but it's also a product behind, and it's a very long process. And yeah, we made a lot of experiences. Some experience weren't very good, but others were very good. So we collaborate with a tier two, which is for us a very, very good collaboration. But we also try to collaborate with a tier one, which did not work at all. So it was for us a hard time to till we understood what did not work good, and that there was no base for a collaboration. And it's the same with OEMs. But to be honest, with airlines, it's easier, even if they are big players in the industry. But airlines count much more on passenger experience. You mentioned that we do a passenger experience product, and for airlines it counts much more to have a better passenger experience than for an OEM, for example.
Both of you, Achim and Omar, you mentioned aviation is not a very friendly industry. So a question maybe to all of you, as we're being confronted with these challenging sustainability goals, it also means that a lot of processes, a lot of products and technologies will need to be revisited. And does that make it easier for startups? Does it make it friendlier to enter the industry? Or would you say it becomes even harder?
Well, I could volunteer some things, but you are the startups really. But the way I see it is startups can satisfy the solution requirements of be that OEM or airline or any of the players within the system. But the key is different. So is it a convincing product? Is there the belief that the product will actually deliver on the promise? And nobody likes to lean out. And this, I think, is some of the worst hurdles, because there is a combination. But in many large companies, you have the thing like, we've always done it this way. And that is really a hurdle. And the process of a startup is like a quick cruiser, if I may use the naval equivalent, whilst you have the large company, which is the supertanker. So how do you align those processes? And in principle, in many cases, the process of the smaller unit is the more agile for the market. But how do you convince the supertanker that they have to change processes? I think that is the biggest hurdle. And sustainability and everything, you can argue everything, but that is one of the key challenges to drive home when you get into a larger corporation. I don't know your experience, but maybe you give some feedback on that.
Yes, I can 100% confirm. It is like we are a speedboat, it's sometimes said. So Tom Enders from Airbus said very often that Airbus is the super tanker and we are the speedboats, and so we have to try to steer them a bit or control them a bit and push them into one direction, and altogether we could do it. And therefore they founded, for example, Airbus BizLab, a very good platform to start and to grow up the business. But they missed, for example, to find a way how to bring the startups from the startup accelerator program to collaborate really together with the companies. For sure, there are some examples that it worked, but mainly it don't want to say it failed, but it became very, very hard. So for us, it's a two-side thing to collaborate with an OEM. So we have very good support from some departments of Airbus, for example, and on the other hand, it's very difficult to try to figure out if there could be a long-lasting relationship also on a contract base. But anyway, the support when we work together with an airline and come to Airbus, it's perfect for us. But because we know the people, it's very kind from them. But it's, as Nico already said, it's hard to figure out who is then in charge to decide whether to collaborate on a long run or not. So we had many appointments to talk together with different departments and to figure out who is in charge to find this decision. That makes it sometimes a bit difficult. Anyway, it makes fun also to work in this industry. So I like it every day, even if the last 1.5 years were very hard. But it still is nice to be here.
I tend to agree with both comments. Obviously, startups are looking to get their results faster. They're looking to find the faster path to either to market or to just proving their concept or whatever. And in many cases, that's very interesting for the startup, but has nothing to do with the OEM that has its own business plan and needs to go to work. And I found for us, the direction is somewhat a bit different because we are the OEM, but we find ourselves with a lot of supply chain partners that are traditional companies dramatically bigger than we are and have their way of doing things. And they are looking at our schedules saying, this is completely impossible. And I think the analogy of big boats, small boats ends when a good product with a good business plan is out there. It's the interest of some of those very, very large companies, and I'm talking about literally everybody that we've mentioned. It is in their interest to be out there, and it's in their interest not to miss out on significant opportunities when they happen. So the ability to come in and convince them with the quality of the product, with the likelihood of this product to sell, regardless of their participation, and with the long-term business plan or the market appeal of that product and what it means financially, is actually something that this industry knows how to listen to. But as was mentioned, it really matters who do you talk to, how do you interact with those companies. They have their own processes. We're not going to teach the industry new processes of doing business. They've been in place for a while, but we can definitely engage in the right way. And when they see an opportunity, I think the industry can definitely move and can definitely move significant resources. And I think that's really the heart, kind of going back to your question about what should we change or how does the industry react to the need to really incorporate sustainability better. I think that you see two very, very distinct levels of response. One is just the general investment in these fields. It started off a while ago in making engines more efficient because it makes economic sense, it saves fuel, that's good for business. It went on to looking at future projects. Airbus is a great example with the eFan in the beginning and then the eFan X, and now the commitment to hydrogen. All of these things are a part of the strategic path that Airbus is kind of plotting going forward. But in parallel, the ability of groups like Airbus, but also like GKN and Safran and SAF and Curtiss-Wright and Honeywell and Garmin, all of those players in the industry throughout the supply chain, their ability to look at different programs and say, wait a minute, actually the more electric airplane means a lot to me. It doesn't matter if it's an electric plane, if it's a hybrid, or if it's a hydrogen-based future, maybe. This thing will need electric actuators. And I can make electromechanic actuators that do clever voting and whatever. It will just take about a decade to develop and then to certify and then to bring to market. So you see that a lot of companies are actually building those building blocks as we speak because they understand something is coming. And it takes that kind of collaborative effort. No one in this industry can go it alone because it's a combination of a regulatory change, of a supply chain maturity process, and then of the way we do business. And all of these actually, when working in the same direction, the supertanker and many speedboats working together, all of these actually are very effective. The industry can get amazing things done. It just takes a while. It takes a lot of rulemaking. It takes a lot of supply chain preparation. And then you get amazing products. Very, very safe, very efficient, but it's just hard to do. And we want them to be as safe and as efficient as they are. So I actually think it's not a bad thing. It's just a process that when you look at it from the sidelines, it doesn't seem like it's moving much, but it is moving.
I think you raised your key point, which you raised was the importance is whom do you address? How do you address? Do you address the person who will lose his kingdom because this is a much better solution, so he will fight for his kingdom? Or you just said you save fuel? I mean, I've seen cases where the fuel saving modification on the engine goes into the maintenance budget, whilst the fuel saving goes into the financial budget. So actually the maintenance budget will be overrun, although overcompensated by far by the financial budget. But the maintenance division of that, and I've worked for many airlines, so don't try to second guess which one that was, North America or Europe. But the maintenance organization said no, and it took about a year to get that through. And it was financially at group levels a no-brainer. So I think the key, what Omar has said, is whom do you address? How do you get your message about a sustainable, good new product feature or a new product into the system?
So what if you're a new player, what are ways to find out who are the right persons and who are the right parties to address? Because aviation is not only a complex industry, it's in many ways also a closed shop with the regulations, with the different players who have been very much established for ages. How do you inch forward, and what are strategies you can follow as a startup to talk to the right people?
Well, I think what Nico already mentioned is that you should figure out whose kingdom you are fighting against, and you should not talk. For sure, you should talk to them, figure out how they work and how their processes, how their workflows go. But mainly, you should figure out for whom it makes sense to collaborate with you. So, for example, how can they make more money with you? So even if you are from external and they have to buy your product, and to figure out how they can, if we talk collaborating with an OEM, if who can sell to the airlines more of our product and make money with our product, and not who's internally for this product responsible. So I think that this is one major point to figure out who is supporting your product, who is against your product, or who is against the people who are supporting you. It's so very often about politics in the company and not about how good is your product and or how bad is it, but mainly about politics. So which stream you go with, and if you meet the right people, I think you have to talk to a lot of people, and then you have to evaluate if they could support you or not. Or if they would support you, not if they could, but if they would.
Yeah, I definitely agree to this. I think the only side I would like to add would be just be out there. I think there are two things that need to be kind of treated. It is very important to put yourself out there in the trade shows, to get to the conferences, to talk to the people in the manufacturing organizations. We've had, it wasn't my idea, it was actually my co-founder who was a veteran of, that was his 10th startup, and he was the first investor in the company that when we started, told me, look, you need to go and sign up to some of the committees making the rules around, the standard committees, ASTM and SEA and RTCA. And all of those were very weird for me. Why should I, as a startup, invest time in all of those, dry, boring committees? And it was probably one of the best networking opportunities. The other side of it is when you are out there, don't be shy, just ask. The big companies and even the small companies, they know that they are not very accessible, and they know that sometimes it's extremely difficult to figure out. And Nico's example about the difference between different organizations within the company is spot on. In some cases, you're just talking to the right organization and everything is easy, but in some cases it's the exact opposite. And now what you need to do is to fight the wind that you yourself created. So I think asking whoever you're talking to, what would be the right way to engage, who would be the right person. And it doesn't mean it has to be the most senior, it doesn't mean anything. It just means you need to listen to the organization and into its processes, and then figure out what works for you. So just being out there and not being shy, being able to ask the question and say, guys, I want to talk to this and that company. How do we do this in an effective way? And in most cases, they will tell you. The people from that company will tell you what's the right path that they can draw. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, ask someone else.
And the key is also
yeah.
give up. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, that was only the key is not to give up. I've seen that in many cases when I ran sales, and CEOs told me, no, we like you, but forget your product. And eventually, some of those airlines are still all Airbus operators. And they had been Boeing before. So there is, if you don't give up, persistence together with a good product actually helps.
Yeah, it's right. And I think it's also that you have to be sometimes a bit harder and not too polite, because sometimes we talked, for example, we in the beginning when we started our startup, we were dealing with a tier one to collaborate, and we presented a lot of information about how we would do it and how we not would do it. And it was the plan that we would collaborate very closely. And then from one day to another, they said, oh, I'm sorry, we won't do it. And a few months later on an air show, they nearly presented our solution. And we were, from my perspective, we were much too polite and did not work hard against it. But to be honest, if you don't have the financial background, you in the beginning don't do it. Meanwhile, it would look different, but and we are still here and working in the industry, even if some companies said in the beginning, okay, it's 1 year, 1.5 years, and then no one will see you again. But meanwhile, we have 2021, and I don't want to say that we are totally established, but we are nearly 5 years on the market, and we are still there, and we get new clients. And even in the Corona crisis, we got a new client and a big airline, which is very interesting, which is very good for us, and it's an honor for us to get a new client within these difficult times. And this shows us that we did what Nico said. You have to be convinced of your own product, and you have to go the long way, and you have to believe and or trust in yourself, and then you will succeed. And this is what we obviously meanwhile did, I think. Yeah.
I mean, we talked a lot already about startups dealing with the big guys, the big fish in the sea here, and bringing aviation forward. Do you think there will also be promising ways to cooperate between startups and the existing aerospace companies, that they might change their perspectives as well and see these new players as great partners, maybe even to work on into the future? How do you think about these aspects?
I
think
think
I can take it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, just a short note. I think that a lot of people are convinced within the big companies that it would be worse to collaborate with an OEM, but the structures are not given that a big company could easily just do some prototyping or work together. Sometimes I think it would be much easier if there would be a subsidiary of an OEM that can acquire the product and then can provide it internally without a big purchase process. And I think this could be a good idea, because sometimes some departments would like to work with the startup, but they have not really the chance because it was not planned in the budget. And it needs a long time that you have it in a budget. And when you have it in a budget in 2023, it is in 2 years. The startups don't have the time to wait 2 years to figure out how they can collaborate with an OEM.
I think if I can maybe augment this, I think if the question is around collaboration, I think there are two approaches that are contradictory or that kind of fight against each other in every major company. On the one hand, there is a very significant need within the big organizations to get the new ideas or to get new products from the startup community. And moreover, it is fairly easy for some of these big players to buy into ideas. I'm not necessarily saying buying companies and integrating them correctly, and diversification through procurement is never easy. But the idea of taking new ideas in and implementing them, even if you're second in the market, especially in the aviation industry, big picture for most products, that's actually not a big problem, because the life cycle of a product in the aviation industry is very long, and the longevity of IP protection, the longevity of companies that come out and have those ideas is sometimes dramatically shorter than that specific product. So it is in a way the interest of major players in the aviation industry to look around, be slow, and just copy whatever works. It's almost a business strategy. And I won't say the name of the guy, but I did hear this from a very, very senior manager of one of the main OEMs. That said, I think there is another angle, that is OEMs sometimes, or major aviation players sometimes find that the way to get the right kind of talent into their system is actually through either collaboration or procurement of those other companies. So it is in the interest of the big players to look at what's happening outside, either to find a way to work together, or unfortunately to copy. But I actually don't think it's so bad, because sometimes it doesn't matter who made it first. It matters that it goes to market. And then on the third is to be able to diversify and to increase the potential of your innovative workforce. And those really are the three trends that feed into those basic two fighting trends, which is, I'm not used to working with this organization, and I want the innovation, but I don't want too much disturbance in my procedure. So you find a lot in this matrix of interests. It's really all about what's the culture of the company, and how does it, I'm talking about the big aviation player, what's the culture of the company and how does it approach innovation in general? And then a specific question of, how does this fit to your product as a startup? Is it a good fit? If it's a good fit, who do you need to talk to? And that goes back to our discussion earlier. about relationship and the way we interact. So understanding culture, looking at those contradicting trends and the real interest of the company, and then figuring out if it's a fit or not is really at the heart of any relationship, I guess.
I think you raised a good point, and it's let me go even deeper than saying it's the question on whom do you address and how do you address. Like the OEM may want to standardize, the airline obviously wants the passenger experience and wants to standardize within the airline, but not within the industry, because like an A320 of Lufthansa is the same as that one of American, or a 777 is the same for every company. So it's the product and the features which will be differentiating. So everybody has a different agenda there. And so the interest is not only whom do you address within the respective company, but maybe one of the other players is actually the road to convince. Like at a certain time, one manufacturer wanted to get something in. The airlines didn't really like it because it was creating an extra cost in the airlines, but it did actually standardize with the OEM. So the OEM actually used the airports because they actually would like that as well. So the airports put pressure on the airlines, and that's how the OEM got it in. And that, I think, is a very good case on how to leverage every player in the industry, not only the individual people or kingdoms or whatever I said before within the company you're talking to.
That's great input, and I'd like to turn this to another challenge that was already addressed here earlier, is when it comes to the transformation of the aviation industry, is the speed. And we have the strict regulations, we have long cycles and high cost for R&D, and all of which are there for a reason. But do you think the startup industry, or just learning from other industries, can help aviation become faster in bringing new innovations to market, and becoming more sustainable, and maybe also in some ways revolutionizing the processes within the industry? Is that also a role that the startup ecosystem could play? Maybe Omar can take this as he is working
Yes.
more or less on this
Sorry.
with aviation directly.
Yes, exactly. So I think to simply answer the question, it's a clear yes. I think the startup scene, again, I was trying to be a bit more blunt about it in the very beginning of our conversation. I think there is room for startups to give the industry a kick in the butt, if you will. And I think it's a positive kick in the butt, because it creates demand, and it accelerates programs. And I'll explain my thinking. When we started this this program, we approached. I can talk about it because it was then made public. We approached Honeywell is a huge organization. They have a lot of products in the aviation market, and they are a very successful organization in the sense that they have very well organized development processes, and those create very compelling products, and they dominate some aspects of their own markets. And we went into the room at the time. I think we had 7 employees. I was obviously there, and I said, look, guys, I need you guys to build me a fly-by-wire system that will weigh about 4.5 kilos, will cost roughly 10% of what the 787 system does. But, oh, by the way, here's the list of functions we need. It has everything the 787 has. And they looked at us laughing. And as was said here before, sometimes the response is, you know what, talk to us in a year or two, we'll see how this is going. But we were very persistent. And after a while, we got to the right group of people, and Honeywell was very accommodating in the sense that they understood that something is steering and happening in the aviation market, and they should probably pay attention. And that's a cultural decision, right? So once they do go past this stage, and They talk to you about the product you asked them to develop. And again, it's going to be a portion of a much bigger product that maybe could go to market, maybe with this partner, maybe in 6 or 10 years' time. So it's not, let's do this together and sell a bunch and make a ton of money. It's the exact opposite. It's let's make a commitment to some trajectory. And then you get an organization, again, the size and with the pedigree of Honeywell, turn back to you and say, you know what? This is actually part of our strategic plan in 2035. And maybe we can bring it forward if you guys can, do without this and that, and maybe help in the development of these things, and maybe, pay for this, but work on that, and kind of split the world for a second. And then we can make it all happen dramatically faster. And I think it was, again, I don't want to take any credit we do not deserve, but today this specific product is a product that Honeywell sells in the market, and they're loving it. But we probably weren't the only reason they accelerated this program, but we were definitely the biggest and most aggressive one in terms of being able to turn around quickly, give them the product definitions we needed, give them the engineering inputs they needed for us to really be able to move forward with them, pay for some of it, support the testing. We were the ones for which this was a make or break moment. And I think that's really the difference between those very big OEMs and the startup. For a startup, sometimes a specific system would be your life's goal at this year, at this stage, but it will be very significant. So you can throw all the resources into it. You will be dedicated, you will be committed, you will be making this happen. For the big companies, sometimes this is one product out of a few hundreds. And it is in the basket of things to get done, but it's not as urgent. Your ability to shine a light on the market demand and the acceleration of the process is actually very good for the big company as well. So if you manage to find this win-win situation, I think that's exactly how startups and big companies should work. It fails miserably sometimes, but when it doesn't, everybody wins.
Achim, what's your experience on that? Can you share or can you support what Omar just said? Your product is flying on a couple of airlines, as you mentioned. You were able to find a new customer in the airline segment even within the pandemic. But I imagine it's a long and tiring process at times as well, because human-centric lighting, that's for many customers you deal with, is also 1 out of 100 products.
It is, but it is also a product that nearly everyone who is related to passenger experience understood and understood. So when we come or when we talk to airlines, they understand what we offer, and it does not need a long time to explain what the effects for the passengers are, and it is then mainly to convince that our lighting solutions anyway go align with the corporate design of the airlines, because sometimes they think, okay, we have, for example, blue light that activates and red light that supports better sleep, but that we can combine everything with the corporate design of the airlines. This is what we have to explain. So we do not have to convince how it works for the passengers, but we have to convince that everything goes align with their user experience and their corporate design. But sometimes it is also very important to really meet the right people. Also, for example, with an MRO where we collaborate with this collaboration is needed very long to start, but when it started, we got the chance to bring it in VIP aircraft, and we have much more fields where we see our product now and where we can place it. And so I think it's mainly to find or to catch the right moment with the right people. which supports the product in the long run. And then it's what Omar said, it's not important if they copy it or not, because if they copy it, it is a proof of concept, what is perfect for us. And we can say, okay, we have this idea, we have this product. You can see that, for example, company XY is also offering this product, and so for us it's best proof of concept. So it's, from my perspective, it's a hard way, but it's easy when you have the foot in the door and get the first offer, get the first contract.
Omar just highlighted the importance of persistence. Nico, you have the background, with within the big companies. Do you think there is anything else that startups can do to get attention within the big companies for their product or for their concept?
No, I think we raised everything. It's like a convincing story that they're there to stay. Some of the topics we have skimmed on is sustainability, and sustainability means also things will start small, because you will not start on a 777 or A350, but we'll start on small aircraft, and we'll start with small elements, and therefore pushing that through, that understanding is important. And at the same time, talking to large corporations, persistence, the right people, and trying to find where to cut the red tape for the funding, because we didn't talk about the funding. I mean, I'm raising it, but I obviously leave it to you two. The funding is something, if it's over administered and takes ages, like some of the government fundings which are around, or if it's too complicated because you can't access the pot, or the companies don't have a pot. I mean, what it was raised before. That is, I think, the key to get in. Once you know which strings to pull, to have the funding relatively quick, or to find a funding partner, to talk to the right person, that you're not stumbling across the kingdom. And the kingdom is, I mean, one is the budget, which I raised, but the other one, let me tell you, on a digitalization topic. The digitalization, there's one airline I'm working with who has 10 people in a certain division. Similar sized airline somewhere else in the world has close to 200 people. And the 200 people airline is not willing to change. It's all a question of digitalization, because some processes can go digital, including, and digital is not only about headcount. Headcount also means usually the speed of decision, because everybody wants to say something, because otherwise, why is that person there? And the lean organization, trying to address the lean organization as a startup, is usually a little bit more successful. I don't know your experience, but that would be my comment on that one.
At least during the pandemic, it was good to have a lean organization, because otherwise it would have been much harder to survive the last 1.5 years. But anyway, I agree with you that it's mainly important to figure out how you can be funded, and this is, you mentioned one point, the governmental fundings regarding research. So this is sometimes for us very hard, because we do not have the big history in earning money over the past decades. So it's very often that the people who decide if a governmental funding is given for research, for example, they say, okay, but Jetlight is a very small company, and they did not have had the big revenues over the past years. So how should they have the revenues or the money for the next 3-4 years to doing research with governmental fundings. And this, from my perspective, I do not understand, because from here, at least in Germany, the government says every time we have to support startups, but then at this point, there is no chance to get a R&D funding by the government. So I would exclude the city of Hamburg, because here it worked very well, and also in the beginning to establish a startup, it worked very well. But for R&D funding, like for example LUFO here in Germany, it was, or it is, nearly not possible for startups to get the funding. But on the other hand, there is a lot of money in the market to get fundings. For sure, you have to convince the people of your business story and your business case, and this has to be a long-lasting vision behind the business case, and not only that this is a product and that's it, but that we have a vision for next evaluation processes of or the next steps for the product. And then it's not very easy to get funding, but there is a lot of money, but you have to find the right partners, and you have to think or you have to evaluate very good if you would like to have a strategic investor or a venture capital investor, and if you would like to, not if you would like, but if you shrink your business opportunities with a strategic partner that says, okay, we invest in your company, but you're not allowed to collaborate with our competitors, then it shrinks your chance to become excessive, to have success at the market, because you cannot work just for one OEM or for one tier one or for one partner. And therefore, I confirm what Nico said. It's hard to find the right funding. It's not hard to find a funding, but it's hard to find the right funding.
Speaking about the funding, do you think? Sorry, Omar didn't want to overrule you.
No, that's fine. I actually just wanted a small comment on funding, because I think both of you made very, very solid points. In my experience, the best way to get this done is for everyone to do their jobs and their jobs only. Meaning, let the financial markets or the venture capitalists or the angel investors be your investors. Let the clients be your clients. Let them buy product and not buy pieces of your company, because it just creates dilemmas, conflicts of interest, and control issues. And if you can keep, and if the government is able to help, I completely agree. I think it's true for every country. Governments are really good in kicking stuff off, but they're really bad in giving proper R&D allocation where it's needed. It's in many cases just going to the same old partners, because there is always this is more credible an R&D effort because they've been doing it for years, and oh, by the way, it also supports more jobs and does more things, and it's very, very hard to win against. So I think, again, government grants or all sorts of competitions and other support factors are nice bonuses, but at the heart of it, you need an investment base that should come from investors, and you need a client base that should be real clients. Everything in between just mixes things up.
Okay, wonderful. We have a final question, and I'm coming from Germany, which is in the land of the auto, so I always like to highlight Tesla as an example of a new industry player successfully entering and even disrupting an existing market, and something that the likes of BMW, Mercedes, and so on probably would have deemed impossible 15 years ago. Today, when we look at the OEMs in aviation, we look at Airbus, Boeing, maybe a little bit Embraer, but do you think that we could still see a Tesla moment in aviation? And Nico just mentioned that earlier. He thinks sustainable aviation will start on the smaller scale. It's actually right the spot where you, Omar, are probably positioned with Aviation. It's a 9-seater. Do you think this will be the breakthrough moment for sustainable aviation, but also the entering gate for new players?
First of all, thank you for the comparison, but I don't think that's a fair one. Obviously, to Tesla, I don't think they. No, I'm kidding. It's I think there is a lot to. There are a lot of similarities between any industry being disrupted by a major player who then becomes a mature OEM. That's something that's very rare, and when it happens, it's a big deal. So Tesla carries a significant story. I think the Apple story with the iPhone was somewhat similar, but from an established player. There are stories where products and companies changed markets and either accelerated existing processes or created completely new directions and processes. I think the aviation story will be slower. That's the heart of the way we see it right now, and not so much because it's not as interesting, not as important. I actually think it's more interesting, more exciting, and more important. I think that the revolution in aviation is happening as we speak. It's just a revolution that happens safely. It's a revolution that happens with moving very, very significant supply chain players to the place they need to be so that we actually have the pieces we need to move forward. And I would say, from a scale perspective as well, it took billions and billions of dollars to get Tesla to actually manufacture successful vehicles. It takes billions of dollars to make airplanes like this. And the difference is that the return in the aviation industry is not as quick. So that's why you're seeing a slow motion revolution as well. You know, the many jokes about how do you make a small fortune in aviation, you start off with a big fortune, are true. It takes a very, very significant investment and a very good team to solve the problems over years, and then you at best break even, and then in the next product you're going to make money. So that is an interesting and not as compelling story to the short-term investor. But I think to the world and to the long-term investor and to the industry, it's actually a dramatically bigger story. So it remains to be seen.
I think, Omar, you raised a superb point. It's the complexity, the scale, and it's also the look at the infrastructure. Because coming back to Luca's point, Tesla is a great idea, but it's still a car with four wheels. And instead of putting a hose with fuel in it, you put a hose with electricity in it. So it basically uses, let me simplify, more or less the same infrastructure. If you go into hydrogen, electric, or anything more sustainable, you use a different infrastructure. You may have to redesign the aircraft, how they look, the aircraft designs, because suddenly, take a battery powered aircraft, the takeoff weight is the landing weight because it doesn't burn anything on the way. So that means a completely different aircraft design. And that means you may need some new infrastructure. And it also means you have to write off billions in existing infrastructure, be that airports, airlines, or OEMs. And that, I think, is the challenge, why we have a slower speed. And that is, on the other hand, the opportunity for startups. Because of the slower speed, we'll get more and more pressure to improve in aviation. And therefore, the agile speedboats, as I called them earlier, will become more and more important in that story. Because let's face it, more than 70% of all the carbon or fuel is burned on long haul, and we're not touching long haul yet.
Yeah. Achim, your product is on long haul. Are you confident after this, going through this pandemic, that you have also learned a lot as an entrepreneur?
Yes, we learned very much over the last 1.5 years during the pandemic, and we learned who are the companies you can count on, and this is very much a very big German airline, and for us this is a proof of concept what could not be better, and therefore we really learned which companies it is worth to open, collaborate with, and to be open to the people. So it's really related to the people who you work with. So,
okay. Thank you very much. It's time to close this, unfortunately, but gentlemen, it has been a great honor and tremendous fun to discuss with you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. And
Thank
I
you
hope
so
you in
much.
the audience like this as well. If you'd like to stay informed, please give the Crystal Cabin Awards and the Sustainable Air Lab a follow on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or through our websites. I hope to see you all again next year at the physical edition of Aircraft Interiors Expo. And until then, enjoy the rest of this year's AIX Virtual. That's all from my side. See you, and thanks again to our panelists.